Well, hey, in this video, we're going to talk about how do you know if it's a good choice or a bad choice. And I have Joanne in the studio with me today.
Hi.
Who is our expert on how to know choices, if it's good or bad.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
This is going to be a good conversation today.
Yes.
Truthfully, we really want to talk to you young people out there, and we're specifically talking about choices about drugs and alcohol. But let's be honest, even as adults, it's good to kind of measure what's a good choice and a bad choice, and especially when it comes to things about substance abuse. So Joe, let's talk for a few minutes about choices, because a choice either leads us down a good path or it can lead us down a bad path.
Right.
So talking to the students out there specifically about choosing things about drugs and alcohol, let's highlight first, how do you know if you're making a good choice?
If you're not rushed into it, if you're not pressured into it, very rare will you have to make a snap decision. More than likely, you will always have time to think about, do I want to do this or not?
Right.
So you don't ever want to be pushed into it or rushed into it.
Okay.
If you know it's a wise decision and you're going to feel good after you make that decision,
Right.
it's going to feel right. It's going to feel good. You'll be happy with the choice that you just made.
Right.
Let's say if your parents are in the room or happen to show up where you're at, would you feel comfortable with them being there, seeing what you're doing?
I think that's a big one. If you had an audience of parents or a younger sibling or a religious leader that's in your life, if they were watching what you were doing, would you make the same decision? And a good choice would say yes. You wouldn't be afraid to make that decision or that choice with them there.
Exactly. You might even say, come join us.
Right, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else about good choices that to know if it's a good choice?
Well, yes. It's not going to it's not going to harm you or
Yes.
anyone else. And of course, your moral compass. Are you going to
Right.
feel good about yourself after you've made this decision? Or are you going to think, I shouldn't have done that?
Right, right. Yeah, I think for good choices, like you said, and I think when you say wise, if hopefully people have, as a young person, you have some goals and some things that you want to accomplish in your life, whether it's in sports or in theater or choir or whatever it is. And so if you're making choices that lead you away from some of those goals, that wouldn't be good. But if you're making choices that helps you to further and to move closer to those goals, then those are good things.
Right.
And I think, like you said too, all of us have a moral compass to some form or fashion of what we think is right and wrong.
Right.
And so good choices are going to not violate that moral compass in
Right.
terms of making a bad choice or a good choice.
Right.
So those are
exactly.
good. Those are good things to think about, especially the one that I think if someone else were watching you, would you still make the same decision?
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
now on the flip side of that, how do we know if it's a bad choice? What are some things students should be thinking about?
You definitely don't want to be bullied into it. It's not worth it. Already have a plan in place. If you're being bullied into doing something that you know is not going to be a wise choice
Right.
for you. And if it's going to make you feel uncomfortable, when you're just hesitating,
Right.
just that little bit of time, that's when you hesitate. I think that's the time to turn around and say, I'm done, I'm out of here.
Right. I think any time that you have that check in your heart, a little bit of, I know this was probably not the best decision to make.
Right.
That should be the red flag of then don't even make that decision until you give yourself more time. Because like we said in the good choices, that if you feel like you have time, you don't feel pressure to make a choice, you'll make a good choice.
Right.
But if you're in a situation and you have that sense like, I don't know if this is the right choice, then know that in that moment at least, it's not the right choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get yourself out of there.
Right.
That would be a good choice.
Right, exactly. Okay, what else about bad choices should students be thinking about?
Well, if you feel guilty and I know better,
Right.
I shouldn't be doing this, and then you have this awful guilt. Maybe I can't. I need to talk to somebody about what I did, but you feel too guilty, so you keep it all inside, and that's never good. you know, even if you make that bad choice, and don't ever be afraid to go and say, I just did this.
Right.
You know, give me some guidance, and what will I do the next time? Have a plan in place.
Right.
What will I do the next time
Right.
if I'm presented with this?
Yeah, because I think sometimes with the bad choice, and I'm going to have you share here in a minute, just an example of this in your own personal life, but sometimes we make a poor choice, we feel guilty about it, and instead of then going and talking to someone, making a good choice from there to say, I need to go get help for that, and using drugs or alcohol is kind of my escape is not the answer.
Right.
But now in our guilt, we just keep making that same choice because we're just trying to avoid that guilty feeling. That just leads us to more and more bad choices.
Yes, yes.
So Joe, why don't you share briefly about how that scenario has played out in your own personal life?
Yeah. Well, my son, he was 29 and married and had 2 beautiful children, and things in his life were going on that he didn't know how to fix. Mm-hmm. And he got into a state where he just started getting very, very depressed. And to Russell, failure was never an option. He wanted to make everything in his life work.
Right.
And but he never opened up. I think people started to sense he wasn't himself. Mm-hmm. Something was going on. He would say certain things like, my marriage is in trouble. Mm-hmm. This is kind of like what's going on. But it was so surfacey that he didn't really, mm-hmm. even to his best friend, who I always thought would be the one that he could share everything
Sure.
with. And I would hope that would be the case. But in some instances, you're embarrassed for whatever reason. You can't admit that
mm-hmm. that maybe you're failing.
That it was failing. And so unfortunately, it was all just very surfacey. And even though we all kind of sensed maybe something was going on, something wasn't right, he turned to alcohol.
And then made some poor choices in that. And here's the thing, I mean, and Joe, I think for you and in your story, that for Russell, decisions that he made became permanent decisions.
Yes.
And unfortunately led to losing his family.
Right.
And his own life.
Right.
And I think for all of you students out there to really realize, because her son, Russell, was not a kid that you would have looked at and thought was struggling. Like you said, none of you knew. But yet, instead of getting the help he really needed, he went to alcohol as his way to soothe and to escape. And so students, I really want to encourage you, make good choices. Take these things that we talked about today, really think about the choices you're making with drugs and alcohol. And don't think that making one choice, partying on a weekend, can't lead to bigger choices that then down the road can really mess up your life.
Right.
Know what a good choice looks like and make the right choices in your life. It'll save you a lot of grief. Joanne, thank you so much for being here today and sharing.
Thank you for having me.
And students, use those questions below. Have a conversation with a teacher, your parent, with a mentoring group, and process through this and really understand how good choices can really save you a lot of heartache.
Yes.
We'll see you in the next video.